Early retirement is probably something you hear a lot about these days. The FIRE movement, which stands for Financial Independence Retire Early, has really popularized the idea among both young and old alike. The concept of retiring early has garnered a lot of attention from folks stuck in the corporate rat race and unhappy with their current working situation. But what is early retirement really? Does it mean you just quit your job and go lounge on a beach for the rest of your life? For some, maybe. But early retirement doesn't always mean that you're exiting the working world, never to return again. In this video, we'll take a look at some real-life early retirees and talk about how they got there. What's up, YouTube? Thanks for tuning in. We're gonna get right into it and talk about our first early retiree, Richard. So Richard is somewhat of a renaissance man in his career path that was very non-traditional. He started out as a pastor, then ran a cruise travel agency, then found himself in the e-commerce world, and finally wound up selling real estate. By the time Richard and his wife were approaching their 60s, the stress of their careers had become too much to handle, and that's when they decided to sell their house in Ventura, California, and move to Panama. Yes, that's right, the country of Panama. 10 years after that, and Richard and his wife are still living the good life in Panama, and he's actually written several books about his sudden shift and move to Panama, talking about that life experience, and he actually still works several months out of the year as a speaker and lecturer on cruise ships. So in addition to all that, he and his wife now run a small coffee farm in the hills of Panama where they live and have their house that they own, and they're spending about half of what they used to spend on housing and taxes when they were living in California. Another interesting early retiree story comes from Doug. Doug Nordman. He didn't set out to retire at age 41 specifically, but that was where he found himself when he got out of the military after his 20-year career. He was working in the Navy submarine division, and the thought of him essentially continuing to grind out 50 to 60-hour weeks like he had been, but doing that in the private sector, well, it didn't sit well with him. What Doug really wanted to do was just go surfing for a while, and ultimately to spend more time with his 9-year-old daughter. So Doug and his wife did some of the math and realized that they could actually get by on his military pension and the income from his wife's career in the Navy Reserves. With the extra time freed up, Doug learned that he really enjoyed coaching other military personnel on managing their finances and how to progress in their careers, and he ended up doing some consulting work on the side for essentially the next decade. This gave Doug some incremental money coming in, and in addition to his consulting gig, he also started and sold a blog that was geared towards military personnel. So again, he was doing this basically for fun, and because it was something he was passionate about and knew a lot about, and he was able to manufacture that into a functioning blog that he could actually sell and make an income that way. And to boot, he still does weekly posts on the blogs as well. Our last example early retiree is Stan. Stan, on the other hand, had always aspired to retire early, unlike our other folks. It was something he had strived for all his working career. So to that end, he started saving early and maxed out his 401k while buying company stock through the employee stock purchase plan, which allowed him to get stock at a discount. And he also lived below his means throughout his working years to save as much as he possibly could. When Stan was approaching his 50s, he started making extra principal payments on his house with the goal of having that completely paid off by the time he was able to retire. At the age of 54, Stan had done it, and he made and saved enough to be able to retire comfortably. After 31 years at the same company, he finally said his farewells and set off to travel the globe. Well, his globe trekking lasted all of about 6 months. Stan decided to really realized his passion, and he started doing career coaching on the side. Today, Stan is approaching his 60th birthday and owns and runs his own consulting business that does this career coaching and specifically specializes in diversity training for corporate America. So he's still actually semi-retired. He tracks his time carefully with his consulting gig and makes sure that he doesn't spend more than 24 hours a week actually working. All three of these career and retirement journeys are vastly different. We have one who's a serial entrepreneur and worked just about every job and industry you can think of. We have another person who was a military man working on submarines, and still someone who is kind of your average Joe white-collar worker who spent 30 years at the same company. But there's one unifying thread that runs through all of these stories. Have you connected those dots yet? The continuous theme throughout all of these retirement stories is that they never really stopped working, at least not completely. All of these people retired from their careers before the typical retirement age of 65, but they all continued to earn a wage in some capacity, doing something that they enjoyed. The other thing that these three retirement stories all have in common is that they all lived frugally and saved and invested their money. In order to follow your dream and go down a path that may not produce an income for some time, you need to have the financial stability to be able to support yourself through that. Very few people luck into working in their dream profession at their very first crack at making a living. But just because you're not fulfilling your passion right now doesn't mean that you never will. You can leverage the income from your current job to carry you along financially until you get to a place where you're able to quit your job or at least scale back your hours to do something that you really enjoy. So maybe you won't just retire early and kick it on the beach for the rest of your life, but really you probably don't want that path anyways. Many studies have found there to be some correlation between early retirement and early death, meaning people who retire early don't tend to live as long as people who retire at the typical retirement age of 65. Now the data is pretty mixed on why exactly this is, so it doesn't mean just because you retire early you're going to die early. It just suggests that there's some benefit to people who continue to stay active and engaged, whether it's through working or through hobbies that they have after retirement, because it keeps their mind moving. So that's where having something that you're passionate about that you can continue to do after retirement is more beneficial than maybe just playing golf or sitting on the beach all day. If you want to learn how to begin saving and living more frugally so that you can live that early retirement life as well, I'll link to some videos down below in the description that'll help get you there. So what does your early retirement journey look like? Are you itching to quit your job and retire early? Or do you just love what you do and want to keep doing it until you drop? Let me know down in the comments what your plans are. That's it for this one, guys. Thanks for stopping in. We'll catch you in the next one.